Hello Infiniteers, it is Friday and that means it's time for our next episode of Toy Box Tutorials. Today we're going to look at some of the Droid Factory toys that you can unlock in the Twilight of the Republic playset. And we're going to start building our first obstacle course in this toy box, which is going to sit right out over here in this area. And these seem like pretty simple toys, but I think you might be surprised by some of the things you can do with them. So the first thing we're going to start with are the long Droid Factory conveyors, and the factory conveyors in general. I'm going to line this up with the opening in the railings, and I want the direction of the conveyor to move away from you. So as you step on the conveyor, it'll take you away from this central platform, which, by the way, is the central platform in the toy box. We've been working over in this area. This is the next island that we hooked up last time with this droid. So we're going to place this long conveyor belt leading us out into our obstacle course. The next thing I want to do is put a turn in here, and I want the turn to go this way. But you'll notice the conveyor is going the wrong direction. This piece seems like it's designed to go that way, but I need a piece that goes this way, and there isn't one in the drawer. So what do? Well, you may not know that this toy has a logic menu, and if we open that up, there's a property in here called reverse, and if we turn that on, that sends the conveyor in the other direction, which is exactly what we want. Now this piece does not have a logic menu because you can flip this around to get it to go to the other direction. But the turn does, so that's a helpful tip for you that you may need to know for future use. And then we're going to put another piece in here like this, and another turn, and this time the turn's going the direction we want, so we don't have to set the property. We'll put another section of conveyor in here, and actually two of them. That takes us right up there between those two lights. Okay? And then over here, we're going to have another conveyor kind of coming out of that cubby hole. So let's use the short conveyor here first. We'll stick this in this cubby hole that we built, and then we'll attach the long one to that. And then we'll attach our turn to there. And once again, this is going in the wrong direction, so we'll need to set the property. Now, one of the things you might run into when you do this, and you've got more than one conveyor belt where you've set that property, is, and this happens to me sometimes, is I will save the toy box and reload it. And when I come back in, this one's going the right direction. This one sometimes is not. And yet when you come into the property is set correctly. Well, all you have to do is turn it off, turn it back on, and then save the toy box, and then it'll stick. I don't know why it does that. It's kind of a weird little bug, but that's how you get around it. So just be aware of that. If you set that property a second time and then save your toy box a second time and reload it, then it'll load back properly. At least for me, that's usually the case. Alright, so another long section and then a conveyor end, and you'll notice this is right over top of where we're going to put the next conveyor, which is down below. And as we did before, let's stick a little short piece into the cubby back here. And I'm doing that just so it looks like the conveyor is coming out of that wall. We'll put down 3 of these, followed by a turn. And once again, we got to set the property. Then we'll put down a medium piece And that lines right up with the opening in the railing there. So that was why I was really picky when we were building the toy box and putting in all those spacers and making sure they were exactly right, is so that the conveyors would end up connecting everywhere they needed to. Alright, so there are the conveyors for our little obstacle course. Now, let's look at the next Droid Factory toy. It's the first one in our obstacle course, and it's these Droid Factory choppers. We're going to place these here on the edge of the conveyor, and I want to back this up just a little bit so that the blade comes right down in the middle of the belt. If this were over here, it would actually stick off the end of it, so that's why I put that there. And before we put down the rest of these, let me get my spacing right. I'm going to put down a few of these terrain blocks. We're going to go one terrain cube off the end of that block. That's where these will start. We're going to put 2 of them wide, and we're going to go 3 down, like that. And then we'll go back up to the platforming toys. We're going to put a total of 4 of these down. And let me get my screen grab here to make sure I put these in the right spots. Alright, so this next one will go right here. The next one will go right on that seam. And the last one will go right on the edge of the block there. Okay, so you can put those down and just use them as is, and that works fine. But you can do some more things with these that you may not be aware of, because like that conveyor turn, this has a logic menu. And so let's put down a button here so we can experiment with this. So we'll look at the behaviors first. So when the button is pressed, you can come over and connect to the chopper. And you'll notice it has 2 options, play and stop. Play is basically turning it on or starting it up. Stop is turning it off. So you can have a switch on the other side of your obstacle that you can flip to turn these off, so you can run back through and not be in trouble. That's one thing you can do with that. Now if you look at the logic menu, there's actually an additional trigger signal. You have started, which corresponds to the play behavior. It's basically broadcasts this when you turn it on. It broadcasts this when you turn it off. And there's damaged player, and it broadcasts this when the blade hits a player. And by default, it just takes a little bit of health off. So if we come in here and let this thing hit us, you'll see it took a little bit of a chunk of my health off. But you could, for example, hook that trigger signal up to a kill switch and make this lethal. So if we drop that down, and we come over here and we do a new logic connection, when damaged player, and I'll just say any, and we connect it to the kill switch to defeat, now this is going to do a lot more than just hurt Mickey. Yeah. Now it's lethal. So that makes it a little bit more of a threat. So that's one thing you can do with that signal. If we look at that a little bit closer, you'll see you can have it damage a specific player or a specific team. So you can have choppers that only hurt one team or another. You can't actually assign this to a team because there's no property, there's no team connection option here. But you can have choppers that only work on certain players or certain teams. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but it's possible. For my toy box, I don't need this to be lethal, so we'll just leave the kill switch out. But that's what you can do with those choppers. That is more than meets the eye, just like the Transformers. Now, if we look at the next one, the Droid Factory Crusher, this is the same thing. There's more to this than meets the eye as well. So let's drop this down. We'll put a couple of them down. And just like the other chopper, this has a logic menu too. So if we look at the behaviors for this, there's actually 3 options here. For this one, they didn't call it play, they called it start. I'm not sure why they couldn't be consistent, but whatever. And then there's stop, so you can turn this on and off as well. And then we have an option called play once, which will cause this to drop down just one time. And it's worth looking at, seeing exactly what you can do with that. So let's drop one of these out here that we can play with. And let me put down a couple pieces of terrain here underneath of that. And we'll put another one up here. And then we'll put down a couple of controls that we can use to play with this thing. I'll put down a button and a trigger. Right, so we'll have the button when this is pressed. Turn that off. And we'll have the trigger when stepped on by any. We'll have this come down and do the play once behavior. So we'll push the button. That turns it off, and you'll notice it leaves it down. And if we come over here, when this is in the down position, it's like a solid wall. There's no way to get around this thing. You can't even jump through the gaps. It's a complete barrier. You might say, well, why would you want to do this? Well, because you can do the play once behavior. That causes it to raise up and then drop down. And one of the ways that you can use that is if you wanted to set this up as a trap for another player or even an enemy. So let's drop a Zerg bot down here. And you'll see he can't get through. But if we raise it up, that hurt him. That can be a lot of fun. And if you've seen my Aladdin series, the Agrabah Palace dungeon, I did a lot of trap-based behavior like that, where I set up buttons or toggles or whatever that the player can interact with to dispatch the Agrabah guards. And this is another toy where you could do something similar like that. And let me tell you, that's a lot of fun. So that's one way you can use this toy that might not seem obvious. And of course, if you look at this, we also have some trigger signals. So just like the chopper, you have a damaged player signal. So rather than hurting an enemy or hurting the player, You could hook this up to the kill switch and have it be fatal. You also have trigger signals that broadcast when this is turned on, when it's turned off, and when it's played once. So if you wanted to play a sound effect or hook some other logic up to that, you can do that. So that's the crusher. Let me go ahead and delete these since we don't need these. And we're done with this button over here too. Alright, the next piece that I want to look at since we're right here near the terrain, before we look at that, let me put down the pieces of terrain we need over here to get up to that other conveyor. So we're going to place this one down at that level. I'm going to place another one up over here like that. And we'll look at a toy next time that we can use to get up between those two levels, but for right now, that will do. And let me throw down a couple of buttons that we're going to need to experiment with this next toy. Alright, so the next toy we're going to look at is the Droid Factory Furnaces. And just looking at this toy, you have the opening there, so you'd kind of expect you could go ahead and put this here like this. When you do, the flames come on. And you'd expect bad things to happen when Mickey goes into that. And you'll notice nothing happens. It's a wall. And you think, oh, that's a bug. There's something wrong there because those flames should hurt Mickey. Well, this toy isn't as obvious as it first looks. Because the toy shouldn't be like this. The toy should be like that. Alright? What you thought was the opening and the front of the toy is actually the back of it. And when you put this down, this little thing is closed by default. Now you'd expect because it's closed that it wouldn't really hurt Mickey, but you'll see there are flames coming out. So when we come up against it, you know, sometimes it hurts Mickey. Sometimes it doesn't. Right now it's not. This is the behavior I would expect. Once in a while I see it though, where the player comes down and nothing happens. So that's the default behavior of the toy. It's kind of off by default. So to use this toy, you have to turn it on. And this toy has some behaviors. So I'll use this button, new logic connection when pressed. You'll see there's two behaviors. We have play and stop. So you have to turn it on, and you can turn it off. And this is the toy you have to turn on before you can use it. And when we do, you'll notice now that opens and closes. So now if Mickey gets caught by these flames, now he gets hurt. And now it's a threatening obstacle. So that's something to be aware of when you use this toy. Don't place it like this, place it like that, and use a logic connection to turn it on. Ultimately, I'm not going to have these buttons here, so what I really want from my toy box is to hook up my level starter and have that start by default. So we'll come over to my level starter and do a new logic connection on catalyze. And we'll come over here and turn this on. And do play. Okay. And of course, since we're right here, if you turn that off, that drops the thing down. And now it's pretty clear the flames aren't coming out from under that by default. We saw a little bit of flames under there when we placed this toy initially, but now it's very clear that that barrier is doing its job. Alright, the last toy we're going to look at today, the final Droid Factory toy, are these rotating blades. And I'm going to place this about like so, with the blades spinning across the conveyor. And that creates the obstacle that we need. One of the things you would think that you might do with this is drop it down here in the curve of this this thing, but you'll notice, let me see, I can do it down here where I can see this a little bit easier. You'd kind of like this to sit here, and you'll notice you have no problem sitting it on top of this, but on the curve you do. This seems like this would be perfectly suited to sit right in here on the turn, because it becomes a little bit more of an obstacle. You've got more conveyor to cover where this thing can hurt you, but you can't actually do that. One thing you could do, though, however, is you could put down the rotating blades or the conveyor with a replayer, and then clear it, put the other thing down, and then play the replayer back, and that'll put that in there. I think you have to put the conveyor piece in, but I can't remember. I think you might be able to do both. But if you wanted your rotating blades to sit there, the point is you got to use a replayer, because that will not allow you to do that. And by the way, I have tried the trigger area trick, dragging a trigger area over and around this, and that just doesn't work for me for some reason. So normally you would expect you'd be able to place this in here. And stretch the trigger area across the problematic area here. And then use the thing normally and put it down. But you'll see it still gives me that problem. So that doesn't work for me, at least on my Wii U. So that's why I have to use a replayer if I want to do that. But for this toy box, I'm not doing that. I've got one sitting over here, and I'm going to put another one down over top of this conveyor. About like that, and get it as close as I can to the edge of this thing without touching the turn. And there we go. So that'll be my obstacle for that course, and we have two of them. Now, like before, this has a logic menu. And this one has a property. It's called speed. So you can turn that up and make those blades move a little faster. You can also turn them downward and make it a little bit slower, perhaps for younger players. 3 is the default, and that's not a bad speed. And by the way, if you try to connect a button up to this, you'll notice you can do that. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. You can also reverse direction if you want the blades to go the other way. So you can do that, but you have to use a logic signal for it. There's no property to reverse the direction of the blades. So those are the Droid Factory toys, and hopefully this tutorial gave you some fresh new ideas of what you can do with them, besides just placing them in your world and using their default behavior. Next time we're going to look at the rocket engine that you can unlock in the Marvel Battlegrounds playset, and I'll show you some fun things you can do with that in your toy box. And again, you might be surprised by what that toy will do. Until then, I want to thank you for watching. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe for more tutorials like this, and leave a comment and let me know if this particular tutorial was helpful for you. That's all for me today. Have a great weekend.